Greetings from Paranormal M, your portal to the inexplicable and the extraordinary. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest perplexing tales. We hope you're ready for an unforgettable adventure. And don't forget to leave a comment and drop a like. Helps us continue to make these videos. On to story number 1. Ghost Encounter. So let me start this story off. My house was built in 1910, so it's very old and has had many people living in it. I would often hear creaking in our kitchen, or things moving and just disregarding them as my imagination. However, recently, within the past 2 weeks, me and other members of my family have seen this tall, shadowy figure. The first encounter happened to my mom about 2 weeks ago. She was home alone in her room. Our house is basically a hallway and 3 bedrooms. She was laying down, and from where her bed is, she can see partially down the hallway to the other rooms. She says that she's seen a tall black figure that appeared to be wearing a trench coat just walk past her room and towards the front door. So she quickly got up, went to check. However, the front door was locked and our gate was pretty much locked too. My mom isn't easily scared, so she just ignored it. The second story happened last week on Wednesday. We went over to my brother's house for my nephew's 10th birthday party. We were outside smoking a joint. My brother stays in a second-story apartment, and there are some old cabinets on the first floor, right next to his apartment. We were all sitting down on his balcony when my sister's boyfriend looked over to the cabinets and he yells for us over to look. We all look over clueless as to what startled him, and he tells us that he clearly saw a tall black figure come out of the cabinets and disappear. We all went down to check, because I live in Sacramento, the homeless capital of California. So we thought maybe a homeless had gotten into his complex. However, to our surprise, there was nothing there. The third story happened to my sister-in-law. We were hanging out at my house having a barbecue, and we were all sitting in our front yard, and she was facing our backyard when she says that she saw a black figure peek his head out from the corner of our house and just quickly go back. And she told my brother that he went to go check, but he didn't find anything, obviously. This is the fourth and final story. This is from the point of view as the story happened to me. This just happened last night. Give me some backstory here. My brother plays in a band, so he was invited to play at a birthday party. It was 8 to 11 p.m. and we like to smoke weed, so I'll normally help him set his drum set, and then I would go roll joints for us to smoke on his next break. I was sitting in his car with the windows down so I could hear the music, rolling a joint. I was right outside of the venue, so people kept walking by to enter the party. There was a street light about 10 feet in front of me, so keep in mind I can see everybody that would walk past me. Then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my right eye, I see a black figure dart past the front passenger window. And I look over to see nothing there. I quickly looked through the rear passenger window to see if anyone was going into the party. But I didn't see anything. I got out and walked around the car to see if anyone was messing with me and walked down the street. I never seen anyone that could have explained what happened. All these things have happened within the last 2 weeks. I really have no idea what it could be. Maybe a deceased family member. We're also in the process of moving houses. I do find it weird. Maybe it's a spirit that doesn't want us to leave. Please let me know what you think about this. and if you've ever encountered something similar. Story number 2. My dad visited me and got proof. So about 3 years ago, my dad passed away. Around a year or so later, I got a puppy because my adopted dog also passed around the same time. I thought getting a puppy would be just perfect for me to occupy my time and just not feel the void of not having my dad around. My sibling would enjoy having a puppy around too. All in all, it kept us as a family pretty busy too, and have a schedule and routine. Anyways, my house was 3 stories. The house originally was a 2-bedroom when I was a teen. My room upstairs. As I got older, my parents built me a room on the 3rd floor, which was only the garage. The garage was very long, so it still could fit a car, even if half of it was going to have a room, really. The room in the garage connected to the hallway leading upstairs, which I only went to the kitchen to sometimes stay up late on holidays and weekends to watch TV and relax. Okay, to the point now, there was a routine in my house when my dad went to work and he left every day at the same time at 2 a.m. So if I was up watching TV in the kitchen and living room, he would pace upstairs, and he'd go to the kitchen making tea and getting dressed to be out the door by 2:45 a.m. If I was in my room, however, I was up late downstairs. I would hear him and I knew he was getting ready for work. Anyways, after he passed, I would hear these noises, as if he was still there, getting ready for work. Mainly I heard footsteps as if he was getting ready to go to work. I honestly was so creeped out. Thought he was still here. Also, I would only hear them around that time as well. You might think, well, you're so used to hearing your parents get ready, even after they passed away, you might miss them or got so used to hearing that noise in your house. But I'm making one thing clear. I literally went to bed with this exact thought to tell myself that's what it is. Every night, one time I randomly thought I would ask my mom if she heard it. One day she said no. I think the stress and grief of losing a family member causes someone to remain in a deep sleep. So I knew my mom wouldn't have picked up on the noise. I still thought I would ask anyways. But this is the weird part. I experimented. I thought either of leaving a camera in the hallway to monitor the footsteps, or just speak out loud and ask if anybody was there. I took my puppy, she always slept in her crate in the garage, and moved her crate to the kitchen and decided to sleep on the couch on the 2nd floor where the kitchen and TV was. The first couple of nights, nothing happened. Then suddenly, one night I was home alone after a long time. It was just me and my puppy, and all of a sudden, while I was telling my friend about the things I heard in the house, my puppy started growling and barking at the hallway going up the stairs. She barked at one area for so long. I just watched her and turned the TV volume up. I quickly got my iPhone out, began recording, and I said out loud, "Who's there? If you know me, make yourself known." I kept speaking and I just sat there and recorded. All of a sudden, after a few minutes of recording, I plugged in my headphones and began watching the clips. There I see orbs of light. They were bouncing around me. As I spoke out loud, they came to me and just flew by, and I caught it on camera. I couldn't believe my eyes. Anyone I told and showed my friends said it was him. My dad, I think he didn't want to scare me. I do get easily scared, so this presence was known to me through my puppy and the noises I heard every night. I knew right away, still can't believe this, I broke the iPhone, sadly, because I moved houses since. I'm going to repair it, and as soon as I do, I want to show the video and photo proof. Story number 3. Gettysburg Ghost. Last night, I went on a ghost hunt in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It was like a ghost tour, but the guide gives you a bunch of ghost hunting equipment to use. Tells you the history of the site and then lets you do your own thing. The guide sets up their own experiments too. I grabbed a laser grid. We were on a bridge. Suicide Bridge, otherwise known as the Eisenhower Bridge. The guide and most of the group were listening to a spirit box on the bridge. Me and my partner started walking away from the group across the bridge and down the wooded path. I was shining the laser grid in front of us. Suddenly, my eyes registered something was off. It took me a minute to realize there was a shape in front of me that wasn't there before on the laser grid. It was solid, like a person was there and the lasers were bouncing off of it. Well, I nearly shit myself and spun around real quick to almost run into my partner, who was like, "You saw it too?" We'll no longer judge paranormal investigators that freak out when something paranormal happens, because I always told myself I wouldn't do that, but my first instinct was to get the fuck out. There was no one on the path in front of us, and there was no noise from the trees and brush that anyone could have stepped into the path and then stopped off real quick. I know this isn't as exciting as a lot of stories shared here, but it's the most solid experience I've ever had, and I'm still reeling from it. I didn't have any other experiences of that magnitude last night, but honestly, that was enough for me. Sleep paralysis. Doppelganger pretending to be my mom. It's my second time having sleep paralysis ever since that last time I was attacked by an incubus a year ago. I was in the middle of trying to get back to dreaming, but I was still half awake. Now that I think that, I knew I was awake. I remember going to the washroom twice after waking up sometime around 8 a.m. and going back to my room. My dream was mildly weird, like they usually are. It was about going to a party, then being invited to a Spanish school thing, but it was really just a bunch of teenagers traveling together. At the end, there was a party, and I totally forgot about it, so I was going to grab my makeup. I was having a difficult time trying to grab my makeup because it was like something was blocking me. Something blurred my vision in my dream. I knew I was trying to dream, but I didn't at the same time. Then all of a sudden, because paralyzed in my bed, I felt tingly feelings holding me down. That's the feeling I usually feel when I make an attempt of astral projecting. I remember hearing someone walking on my bedroom's wooden floor. The floorboards are pretty creaky, so it was definitely walking. I remember it hovered by me, thought it was my mom. I remember saying something like, "Hi, Mom." And when she didn't answer and the noises from the floorboards continued, I said, "Mom, I know it's not you." Still no answer. It was my second time being able to break out of the paralysis, and I said, "Stop," loudly. After I said that, there was a voice. A woman said "stop" in a mocking tone. I knew if it wasn't my mom, but I also knew that it sounded exactly like her. After I broke out of the paralyzation again, I knocked on the wall for my mom to come over. That was basically when everything ended. She came into my room and we talked about it. I'm writing this a couple of minutes afterwards, so I still feel very uncomfortable. I don't know if this will add any relevance to the story, but I'm getting into more of the spiritual side of the world. I'm learning about witchcraft and Reiki. I only started learning a few months ago, so I'm pretty new to this world. I remember these past days I kept seeing dark shadows here and there. As much as it's sketchy, I came accustomed to having weird things happen to me. I've been able to see and sense things ever since, really. This was since I was a kid. It's only starting to become stronger because I'm now becoming older and I'm getting basically into all the spiritual stuff. I have a guess that more entities are able to take control of me because I'm naive and weak. I'm also at that time when everything's confusing in my life, so it makes sense that even spiritually I'm having trouble. Had my fair share of talking with spirits and them giving me bad dreams about human sacrifices, but I've never gotten a response quite like this. It was so clever. I could feel the presence of this entity right there in my room. It was nothing like the incubus attack. That entity dived right into it, while this entity just taunted me. Story number 5. Orb of bright white light. I have this dark hallway where I usually see a lot of spirits. They mostly stay in my basement entrance or the stairs. Both areas are darker than the rest of the hallway, too. I've seen the regulars like the Hat Man. Pretty sure we had a cat at one point and a few disembodied heads. The usual. But this was different. I've never seen anything like this before. I forget what I was doing there, but I was right next to the first steps of the staircase up. Right then, at the corner of my eye, not even a meter in front of me, a huge white shining orb moved to the side of me and disappeared next to the opposing wall. It was shining like the sun. At the time, I didn't really think much of it, but after a few days of sitting on it, I have my suspicions. I know that it's probably not one of my spirit guides. I already know all 3 of them and didn't really feel like any of their presence. But I mean, could it be an angel? Although I don't belong to any religion, I have family members who are somewhat religious. I do believe in many different cultures, so that's saying I do believe in angels, biblically accurate and humanoid. And for my feelings when that happened, I guess I was a little taken aback because I felt pretty calm, which I don't know how to interpret it being really a feeling about all the spirit encounters or me feeling calm due to the spirit and encounter itself. Hope that makes sense. Attacked by an incubus again. So I think I got attacked. The last time was when I was in my first year of high school, and now I'm finished high school. Pretty sure it all started when one of my favorite podcasts read an email that I sent in. An email about my first experience, as well as other paranormal experiences. I listened to it about 2 times, read the email that I got back from the podcast, and kind of put it behind me. That was officially 1 week ago. Leading up to the recent experience, many things have happened to me while I was half awake or half asleep. I thought it was due to the fact that I've been working to quantum jump and shift for some time now. And to do that, I went through the astral realm and plane. I'm a person who doesn't mind things like ghosts or spirits, so I think this thing got immediately attached to me. Multiple things were happening to me prior to that night. Someone was rubbing my leg. I felt the bed sheet brushing against my leg. I was visualizing much more clearly than ever before. When asleep, I felt pressures on various portions of my body, and during the first draft of this writing, I was feeling a pressure on my shoulder, as if someone was just kind of holding it, I guess. Prior to the night of July 27th of 2022, I woke up on the 26th at 4 a.m. since I had to do some registration for my passports and such. Much to say, the next day I was exhausted. I was supposed to have a subway adventure with my friends, but some of the lines were closed due to fire, so we didn't end up going. It was about 8:40 a.m. I decided to go back to sleep after eating my breakfast, and I was asleep till 10:30 a.m. During that time is when this went down. I was having layered dreams, something that I don't get too often. During that time, I was constantly woken up from my mom either asking me to put the laundry in my room, taking out the garbage, or saying that she was going out somewhere. So I was in that in-between stage of being awake and asleep. In one of the dreams, I remember the same exact feeling that I felt when I was a kid. My body being pressed up against, lightly sinking me into my mattress. The feeling of rubbing on my arms, waist, and legs. My pelvic lifting up, and you can guess the rest. Before the actual sex part, I'm pretty sure I gave it consent. I said, "What the hell?" Or, "Why not?" I don't know, I'm stupid. It felt good, and for someone who's never been in a real relationship, hormones kind of just took over. I also forgot to mention that I was paralyzed during this whole ordeal. But this time, I couldn't break away from the energy like last time. I felt a bit vulnerable, but it didn't freak me out much as it had last time. I'm now more knowledgeable about all this kind of stuff and not as scared of the paranormal. Because of the last time, I'm still uncomfortable doing research of Incubus. Heck, I hate saying the name right now. If you can provide any information, that'll be most helpful, though. Story number 7. Hat Man being nice. During the pandemic, I got into the occult and witchcraft. I and many people in my family, mostly women, have some sort of gift for that kind of stuff. At 17, I began to meditate more and saw more things that I wasn't able to at the start of my journey at 16. There were a few spirits that resided in my house. Still, for some of them, they're still there. A ghost kid from the 70s. He's pretty quiet and I've only seen him once. A shadow cat. A weird, disembodied face. Didn't really faze me. An occasional poltergeist. Only a few times. Nothing huge. My guides at the moment. Loki. I dabbled in light paganism. And finally, the Hat Man. He and the shadow cat always looked at me in the living room from the basement. My biggest rule is that spirits and entities are confined to the basement, although I see the occasional shadow peek out at me behind a wall. The Hat Man always felt brotherly. I don't have any siblings now, I was always home alone for most nights. I've been low-key neglected as a child, so it makes sense that I've always been very vulnerable. I was chill with the Hat Man staring at me. I would even wave to him. I still, years later, talk to the basement openings when I'm talking out loud. He never hurt me, never made me hella scared. He felt like an actual being at one point. I'm now watching a video. They describe the Hat Man as an eternal father, and that the guy the YouTuber is talking about believes that everyone is a Hat Man's eternal child. I went from, "Oh, Hat Man's so nice," to shit. I've heard that he was malevolent, but he was never really being mean to me. I've always been sensitive and seen things as a kid. Only when I got cast last year, I haven't seen anyone for the most part. Story number 8. What's going on? I wanted to share a truly bizarre and unsettling experience that's been happening in my home recently. I've never been a believer in the paranormal, but I'm starting to question my skepticism. Over the past few weeks, my family and I have been hearing strange noises during the night. It's not just the usual creaks and groans of an old house. It's something more. We've heard footsteps in empty rooms, faint whispers when no one else is around, and doors slamming shut without any logical explanation. One night, my teenage daughter woke up screaming, claiming she saw a shadowy figure at the foot of her bed. I rushed to her room, but there was nothing there. She's been too frightened to sleep in her own room ever since. We've also noticed unusual temperature fluctuations, even in rooms with no windows open, and her pets have been acting strangely as well, barking and hissing at empty corners of the room. I've never been one to jump to conclusions, but I'm at a loss for explanations. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? Is it possible that our home is haunted? Or could there be a rational explanation for these occurrences? Any advice or insights would be greatly appreciated. The most surreal experience I've ever heard at Mount Reiner, the inspiration of The Exorcist. So a little background. It's 2012. I just graduated high school. My brother moved from Florida to Maryland to maintain foreclosures in the Maryland and D.C. area. I spent my 2 summers between college to work with him, giving me a little bit of a break, running his crew around, moving, changing locks, cleaning the house, and taking pictures, etc. Our route sent us around D.C., and he often would put together the morning and browse the Daily Mail and other articles. He somehow stumbled across an article about how the movie The Exorcist was inspired by this property. It was in D.C. on Bunker Hill Road, which we just so happened to maintain one of the neighbors' properties. That day it was my brother and myself, and we decided we would stop where the old 3-story house once stood. To be honest, I hadn't known what was there. I knew of the movie The Exorcist, but never been into scary movies, so didn't really know that much about it. Well, the house where the 14-year-old boy lived in 1949, where The Exorcist was performed, is no longer there. Today, it's a normal-looking historic street with older homes and this vacant lot with some trees and nice grass. It's now a park, and even has signs about no entry between dusk and dawn. On the property where the house sat is a pavilion for the public, shaped in an octagon, if I remember, maybe raised 3 feet from the ground with a wraparound ramp. Around the ramp were bushes that circled the pavilion, so we decided to walk up there. It was quiet, and nothing seemed eerie or strange as we walked up the ramp. This is where it gets odd. We walked up the ramp into the corner of the pavilion, and not until we actually are in the pavilion nearly dead center that we hear buzzing. Not just like a little fly or a bee flying, but hundreds of insects, which we assumed were flies, began to buzz all in unison from around the center pavilion. It was very loud, and I guess you could say a noticeable swarm in the bushes. They didn't fly around, we just stood there and looked around, and then we were shocked and we did not stay. And the bugs are totally normal, but I don't get why they didn't make a sound as we walked up the ramp or around the pavilion, as we were so close to the bushes then. Hell, I maintained several properties and never experienced anything like that in Mother Nature, or anywhere for that matter. Those summers I experienced ground bees to spiders to voodoo in basements, books on spells and witchcraft, glass orbs, crystal balls, trap houses, hell. We even explored the haunted abandoned insane asylum up there, but that moment still freaks me out. Story number 10. A man in my father's house. Ever since we moved in, our new old house my father bought, I was in 4th grade. It started almost immediately. When I went to sleep, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I heard my father snoring in his room and my sister turning in her bed, with a metal bed frame in her room. The footsteps always stopped right outside my doorway. Then something started to happen on daytime. I was alone with our family dog in our house. I was always scared shitless, and so was our dog. I heard strange banging noises in different rooms, and our dog went crazy. It got worse, and I got more scared. During days, I would yell in our house, and this was because my house, and whomever it was trying to make him go away. But during the night, the entity got closer every night. It didn't stop anymore in front of my doorway. It started to step into my room, then step in front of my bed, then sit on my bed. The final day I was home alone again with our dog. I was shaking in the living room with a knife. Our dog right beside me, growling and staring at the hallway. Then I heard this loud bang, like a cabinet fell over or something. Our dog went absolutely crazy, and I took the kitchen knife and I went screaming how I'm not afraid to search the noises for any reasons, but nothing had fallen. That night, I was like glued to the wall in my bed. I was panicked when I heard the footsteps. They got closer and closer like always. I was shaking and had trouble breathing. The thing sat on my bed next to me, but then it crouched over and I felt hot breathing on my neck. My eyes were closed and I thought that this was it. I was going to die. Suddenly it said my frickin' name, gently and hushed. I let out the biggest scream ever and jumped up and ran straight to my sister's room, hysterically crying. She woke up and asked what was happening, and I just cried and stuttered. The man said my name. She asked what man, and I screamed, the man that comes into my room every night. After that, some days later, my dad hit me, and I moved in with my mother. I lived there for a few years and moved back to my dad's. My sister was living on her own now. I moved into my sister's old room. Even though I was now 14, I was too scared to sleep in my old room. I slept with my door closed, but still every night I heard the same dreadful footsteps in the hallway. A few months went by and I was at my sister's place visiting. Old stuff was brought up and my sister asked me if I remembered the man that I told her about when I was 10. I said that I never forgot, and I asked her why she asked. She told me that on that night when I ran to her room crying and told her sobbing about the man, she acted brave for me, but when I told her, her blood ran cold. She told me that every frickin' night she heard the same footsteps for months. She just thought it was just me. When I moved to my mom's apartment, she heard every night those footsteps wandering on the hallways. That's when she too realized it wasn't me. I lived in the house, just me and my father, for 4 years. Every time I was alone, didn't matter if it was day or night, I heard it walking around the house. Sometimes when I sat on the couch watching a movie, my father's door would open behind me and it just walked from the room to stand behind my back. Sometimes it would put its hand on its shoulders, I think, or my shoulders. I would feel it standing behind me and then feel this warm, tingling sensation on my shoulder. The man didn't come to my sister's old room. It would stand in front of the doorway, but never step into the room. It was like the only room in the whole house that was out of reach. The man has done something to everyone who has come to our house. Middle of the day, it touched my grandma's shoulder, would yank everyone's feet who had fallen asleep on the couch, would hit walls or just wander around the house. Found it kind of amusing that people who didn't believe in ghosts would be scared shitless and started to believe after spending some time in our house. Before I moved back to my mom's place at 16 years old, I wasn't scared of it anymore. It didn't hurt me or anything like that. And who knows, maybe it was just checking up on me that I was all right when I was a child. I'm 20 years old now and live in a different city. My dad lives in the house by himself now. But every time I visit him, I just know that the man is still there. If there would be a way to get him from my father's home to my place, I would do it. I kind of miss having it around. Story number 11. Advice, confirmation for possible shadow entity bothering my daughter. To start this off, I'm 21 and I'm a single mom to a beautiful 9-month-old. I live in a granny flat at the back of my parents' property. The previous tenants were the previous owner's daughters and 2 granddaughters. Apparently, the daughter, a single mom, often had fleeting relationships that would move in and out of the flat as well. When I moved in last year in September, I was still pregnant. The very first night, something watched me while I slept. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence. My cat wouldn't stop staring in the direction of the door as well. Now, I didn't know this, but there's a motion sensor light in one of the top corners of my room facing the door. The reason I didn't know this is because it would turn on and stay on, even when neither I nor my cat were moving. This happened again the next afternoon, and I asked my mom to bless the house, as that was normally something we do when we move into a new house, or when weird stuff would happen. After my mom blessed the place, things were fine again until October, when I started seeing shadow people in my parents' house. I could see and feel them watching me. I felt they were angry that I ignored them. Like, I don't know how I got to that conclusion, but it just felt that way. After my daughter was born, my mother blessed the flat again, and everything felt fine. Whenever anyone comes to my house, they say that they feel like they're not alone, that someone is watching them, and that it is angry. This all brings me to the past 3 months when my baby started with what we thought was sleep regression. She would wake up screaming bloody murder like she was hurt and wouldn't fall back asleep unless I held her, and went to go to sleep on the couch in the living room with her. I'm at this point exhausted, frustrated, and I often was finding myself getting extremely angry too, to the point where I would walk away and have just to scream somewhere, which I can't help but feel kind of ashamed about. Now I recently started dating again, and my boyfriend comes to sleep over on the weekends. He has an amazing relationship with my daughter and treats her like his own. When he's over, it feels like the thing that's in my flat is somewhat appeased. My daughter doesn't wake up like that at all, and the very night that my boyfriend leaves, she's a scream machine again. She hasn't known him for very long at all, and isn't very attached to him either. So that strikes out as the possibility of missing him. As well as the fact that this happens Sunday to Thursday, every night. My mom and I theorize that the entity in my house was created by some residual energy from the previous single mom. I heard there's a name for that kind of entity, but I can't remember what the name of it is. Other things I've experienced are as follows. Something called my nickname, and when I go looking, no one's there. Foul smells. Things just go missing and reappear in weird places. Mostly religious stuff. Knocks all over the place. forgot to add that when I picked my daughter up from her cot, which is right next to my bed, she starts looking around like frantically and hyperventilates for like a minute after. Please let me know if you've experienced anything like this and what I can do to actually maybe contact whatever's in my place. Sincerely, a drained, tired mom. Story number 12. Paranormal Train Ride. A while ago now, my partner, we'll call them Jace, our friend, we'll call them Mike, and I were in Bristol, UK for a protest. Once the protest had ended, we spent some time chatting in a park and then went to go get some hot chocolate. Before we knew it, it was getting late, and we had to wait for the last train back to where both my partner and I were living at the time. We were sitting outside the train station when my partner's mood seemed to change. They looked worried. "Are you both okay?" they asked. I looked at Mike, confused. "We're okay, are you?" We both responded. "I feel like someone's in danger," they replied. It was time to catch a train, so we started making our way down to the platform. The station was eerily quiet. There were no people to be seen, not even staff. The last train arrived on the platform. We got on. We sat silently, looking out the window as the train began to move. I felt sick. Something wasn't right. The train journey only takes about 20 minutes, but it felt like it was taking hours. We seemed to be the only ones on the train, and it was pitch black outside. We didn't talk, we barely even looked at each other. There's only one stop between Bristol and Bath. After what seemed like hours, we arrived at what should have been Kensham train station, only it wasn't. There were less lights than I remembered, and the stairs were different. They were on the wrong side and seemed to go on forever. The trees looked distorted and strange. I looked over at Jace. I don't know how to describe it, but it was really just expecting them to say that this wasn't Kensham. I had only ever passed it on the train and thought I might have mistaken it, but I knew that Jace would know. Eventually, we both arrived in Bath, and we couldn't get off that train fast enough. The way back to Jace's flat was along a small path that we went beside the train tracks. As we began to walk, Jace looked at us again and asked, "How did you two find that train ride?" We both looked at each other and in unison said, "Weird." I noticed as I was walking that I purposely wasn't looking at the tracks. I turned to look at them and immediately felt sick and terrified, as if they were going to engulf me into darkness. As we walked, we started talking about the experience, and all agreed that whatever it was, it had something to do with the tracks. I knew it was coming, but it still made my heart wrench when Jace added, "Oh, that wasn't Kensham." We kept walking until we came to a bridge that crossed over the train tracks. It seemed to be looming ominously over them. He started to walk down away from the bridge, and you could feel it in the air. The hairs on the back of your neck were standing on end and wouldn't walk fast enough. "It feels like something's following us," said Mike, and they were right, it did. We kept walking and walking, faster and faster. Something sinister was following us. Couldn't bring myself to look behind me. Finally, we arrived at the flat and hurried in, making sure to lock the door behind us. All we could do was talk about it and try to comfort each other. Jace told us that they thought that they had seen a figure standing on the train tracks as we pulled out of Bristol, the same figure that Mike saw standing on that bridge. None of us slept for a long time that night. Felt safe inside the flat, but anytime I looked at the door or window, I felt like something was waiting out there. The next day felt normal again. and we were ready to do some Googling. We weren't ready for what we discovered. A quick Google search revealed that a person had died on those exact tracks just a small distance down the line at the exact time my partner had stated to feel strange the night before. Story number 13. Seeking help. Possible demonic entity haunting our home. Hi all. First time frequenting this forum and desperately looking for help, advice, maybe an explanation as to why my family's current predicament is happening. I'd like to begin by saying I do believe spirits or something beyond our comprehension exists, but my knowledge about them and our present situation, they're extremely poor. For possible interpretations, our home is an ancestral colonial estate within South Africa dating back to the 19th century. There's a family mausoleum on the outskirts of the property and a somewhat large burial site for the household's workers roughly 100 meters away from the house. And my family members' friends and some visitors have all had strange experiences on these grounds. Throughout the majority of my life, I've experienced strange things in the house. Scratching from within the walls, doors slamming at night, dogs barking at random and at nothing. Footsteps, just general stuff that's scary, but it's also easily discarded with reason. I've always soothed myself back into calm by attributing it to the house being old. However, the past 2 months have been nothing short of a nightmare. I feel like I'm living in a horror movie. What led me to posting this was set in motion by an eerie anomaly followed by an extremely unnerving discovery. Last night in the early hours of this morning, around 1 a.m., I was kept awake by very loud scratching, footsteps, and thumping outside my bedroom door. Initially, I had thought this was a dog and I let it be. A few minutes later, I heard my door handle being turned. It was being turned repeatedly, like over and over, and the door was not being pushed open, nor was there any movement from the door itself. Thinking we were being home invaded, I got my handgun, started screaming, yet the door handle was still being turned. My brother and parents ran to my room. No one was outside my door, nor anyone was found inside the house. Neither was there any breach into the home. After searching, my parents told me that it was a nightmare, and so I just equated it to that. Cut forward to this morning. My brother got up to go to work, and I just went to go to my room. Before opening the door, I had this indescribable feeling in my gut. My body felt cold. Went in to find my sheets sprawled on the sofa and the floor, far on each corner of the bedroom. My crucifix, which is mounted on my side of the bedroom door, was crooked with one of the nails popped out of the door and the other slightly pushed out of the wood. It was nailed in. It cannot have physically been turned, and the nails would have needed tools to be pulled. So what the fuck? A portrait of my oppa next to my bed was very unnaturally crooked also. I immediately felt, and I know that this sounds strange and crazy, but that something very sinister is going on, and that something malevolent, no idea what, was watching me. I got my brother, and he was equally distressed about it, so we got to our parents. My dad thought someone was still in the house. My brother and dad searched the house to no avail, and again nothing was amiss with security systems, the doors, or windows. I went back into my room and saw what we all thought was blood. Photo below, which we could see it. Above one of the mirrors. The mirrors are those sliding mirrors with the closets built into the home, and the height of the blood is very high up on it. It was 3 streaks of blood going down, as if they were wiped there. I stupidly touched it and smeared it so the lines aren't as concise anymore. But that's proof that whatever this is was still wet. You can see it hasn't dripped down from anything, and looks like it had been placed there by fingers. It's extremely difficult to reach without a chair, so I don't know why an intruder would leave that there or willingly do that. This was not here prior to the blood, and it's in a strange position that's been smeared weirdly. When my dad went to take a look, he was visibly frightened, which I'd never seen before. He's very stoic and a strong man, which has furthered my belief that this is something evil. My parents called the police, and they're on the drive up here. They're still discussing it, and they're being very secretive about it. However, they cannot comprehend or figure out what happened, and who or what did this. They do not believe in ghosts, entities, or anything spiritual. But I'll definitely be pushing them into getting the house blessed by our priest immediately. Since we were little, my brother and I have always felt like someone was in our rooms when we slept. We both feel like something's there, and there's a very thick feeling and energy which I can't describe or attribute to anything, but it's somewhat similar to dread or angst. It's intensified greatly in the last few months, with both of us experiencing more physical anomalies. We've both experienced a lot of being touched and scratched. We'll try to find photos, usually on the back, but one had drew blood across my breast, and I had had my hair pulled a few times. Some family members have experienced it when visiting, and my aunt especially doesn't like staying with us because she had similar experiences in her youth as well. My dad doesn't elaborate on it and discards it as nonsense. And she's more of a spiritual type too. Thought a lot of physicality sort of was falling down to scratches and itches in my sleep or getting my hair caught on things. But the more that my brother and I discussed it, we believed that something is actually amiss. And is very, very wrong. Just to note, no one is breaking in, nor are there ways to access the house besides 4 very thick wooden doors which are always deadbolted at nighttime. I don't have any mental health issues either, and this isn't a dream or some product or hallucination, as we both have experienced things that we've never discussed with each other before. The blood is partially dry now, and these photos are of poor quality, but I can take more if requested. The large pink circle is the one which had 3 stripes running down. I smeared it when I got up to go check. The blood was still wet and was on my finger, so this is as of very early this morning. If anyone might please let me know if the photos do mean something sinister or shed light on the intent, please help. My brother and I deeply believe that this was not an intruder, as we have no vents in the floorboards. They're all sealed over. Story number 14. I didn't hear my door open. I live with my parents, and this wouldn't be the first time I've dealt with some type of a paranormal experience. I remember this was about a year ago, so it wasn't that long ago when I was coming back from using the bathroom that night. It was around 1 a.m. when I was about to go to bed, and let me just say my room is the closest room to the living room and my parents' room, and my sister's room was closer to the den in my parents' house. When I went to bed finally, I had just gotten comfortable, had my music playing on YouTube, and all in all, warm and comfy. At the time, I was sleeping on my back with the blanket over my head. I don't know why I do it, I just like to cover my head. Now again, this wouldn't be the first time I've experienced stuff like this. You know, paranormal and whatnot. I usually wake up with random bruising on my legs most mornings, actually. When I was almost asleep and I was enjoying the peaceful thought of being almost sound asleep, when all of a sudden I felt the bed dip down next to my calf and ankle area on my legs. My body froze, I stopped breathing, and my eyes stayed open. Any type of sleep I had was gone. I stayed as still as possible. and then I felt the presence lift up. I finally got the courage to uncover my head and catch my breath. I turned on my phone's flashlight and shined it all over my room. Found absolutely no sign of anyone being in my room. I was scared, awake, and out of breath. What the fuck was that? I stayed up for a little bit longer waiting for something else to happen, but maybe that thing would come back. But nothing happened, so I shrugged it off, fell back asleep. The next morning I woke up and walked into my mom's room and asked her, "Hey, did you come into my room last night and check on me?" She looked at me really confused and said, "No, why would I?" My stomach dropped. I proceeded to tell her what had happened, and she told me that it was weird, but wouldn't surprise her considering the stuff that's happened around our house. Looking back on that time and remembering what all had happened that night still creeps me out. But what makes this story really creepy is the fact that I didn't hear any footsteps or my door to my room open at all. Story number 15. Is this normal to experience after surgery? So a couple of years ago, give or take like 2016-17 era, my dad went under for an open heart surgery. The surgery itself was complicated, but he made it out safely and okay. It was the things that he said afterward that scared me. Once he recovered and was able to tell us what he needed and wanted, he kept on talking about this nurse. A nurse none of us had seen or even noticed around the ICU. He talked about a tall man in blue scrubs with black hair tied up in a bun and a goatee. My dad was convinced it was the devil or something haunting him. He said he has vivid memories of the supposed man telling him how he was going to die, how he wanted to get rid of him. I wish I could say I knew what my dad was talking about, but none of my family ever saw this man. My relatives that stayed overnight never saw him either. My dad still talks about him years later, and he's still too scared to go into depth about this man. The only memory I truly do have is when my dad would call my mom late at night from the hospital. He would call panicked and tell her, "He's trying to kill me, and they're trying to kill me. Come get me." We couldn't, because one, he was in recovery, and two, nobody in my family drives other than my dad. I don't know what my dad experienced that day, and I don't know if there's an answer to all of this. All I know is that I'm creeped out, and I'm like 50% sure that my dad experienced something paranormal through those days. Story number 16. The tall men getting close again. Recalling things that have happened here in my home has never been something I enjoyed. If I'm being honest, it scares the shit out of me. I can't stop recalling this one incident that still makes me nervous now thinking about it. Anyways, a couple of years ago, I was about 15 or 16, so only 4 years ago. I shared a room with my teen, 12 to 13-year-old younger sister. It was during the summer, so nothing was strange to us when it came to sleeping with the door open. Our parents would tell us that it was just a pretty well-ventilated room. But regardless, we were used to that. It wasn't strange to wake up to the room door being wide open. One day, I think early morning, I woke to sounds of my sister crying. I didn't think much of it, but as her older sister, I got up and went to comfort and check on her. She was a sobbing, uncontrollable mess. Her tears felt endless as I asked her continuously what happened. Through muffled sobs, she points at the door and mutters in a broken cry, "The men on the stairs with the trash bag." I was confused and followed her gaze, but I saw nothing. I chalked it up to her just recalling a nightmare and brushed away her fear like it was nothing. Proceeded to get up and closed the door. Closed it to provide us some peace. I calmed her down and lulled her back to sleep since it was still pretty early in the morning. I went back to bed and fell asleep once again shortly after. An hour later, I woke up to her once again crying, yet more terrified this time. Her eyes red, with seemed like more red than before, and I asked what happened. Once again, through her cry, she said, the tall men with the trash bags, they're getting closer. Even I started getting nervous. That was when I noticed the door was wide open once again, despite me locking it earlier. Ignoring my own nervousness, I held her and laid with her as we both fell asleep. A couple hours later, my sister was calmer and better now, but we both knew that we were scared. Almost half a decade later, and she still claims it was the scariest experience she's ever had. I can only consider myself lucky that I didn't witness the tall men too. Story number 17. My mom's childhood stories of her home galaxy. When my mom was young, starting from 2 to 3 years old, she would talk about the triangle in the sky and the triangle galaxy. She said that was where she was from, and eventually she would go back there to be with her quote-unquote old family. The family from before she was here. My grandparents were not into astrophysics. They weren't academics or hobby astronomers. They also didn't have a television at this point, so my mom had pretty limited exposure to any general astronomy knowledge in childhood. When she was around the age of 8, she learned about planets and stars in school and saw the Triangulum Galaxy in one of the space books in the classroom. She immediately told her teacher, "This is my galaxy. This is where I'm from." Obviously, she was just brushed it off, and I admit it could be just shit kids say, but I always found the story to be a bit unsettling. My mom has always been a big believer in aliens and the paranormal, which is probably the reason I'm into it as well. She says that she can't remember much about this from her early childhood, but remembers some of the conversations from when she was a bit older, like talking to the teacher. She says she felt completely confident when telling these things to people because she didn't realize that it was strange to say. It was just her experience, and she wanted to share. She says she remembers being excited to find the excerpt from the book at school because she knew that that was where she came from. Story number 18. Haunted House in the Woods. This is a story about my experience of the paranormal in a remote village. I was in my maternal uncle's house with 2 cousins, and around 11 p.m. one of our neighbors called my cousin's brother, asking for the key of his house, as he was there in their house last. So I will give a description of the area first. It's a really remote village where roads came recently, and before that we used to walk through the woods to travel through the village. And also, houses have big distances between them, like 200, 250 meters. So after the call of 3 of us, we went over to his place. The way was quite creepy because after roads came down to connect the village, the woody way were hardly used. It was getting covered by big grasses and things like this. We reached there, and it was a wooden house. For reference, let's say 2 stories, but actually the ground floor had no rooms, but rather it was a place where they used to keep cows. There were no cows now. It was all empty, and above was where they lived, but at that time no one of his family were there, and he also had just arrived now after months. We went up, and my cousin told that he had kept the key up there in the ceiling, and when he was searching for it, the key fell down. They sent me to go get it, and I went down through the metal stairs, but I was having a creepy feeling. I had a torchlight, and it just went off. I turned it on, got the key, and ran back up. We went in, had some weed, and talked a bit. There were 4 of us. Then we decided to go to sleep. 2 of them slept in the bed and 2 of us slept on the floor. Me and the person on the floor weren't sleepy, so we decided to listen to some music as there was no internet service in that area and we had some songs saved on the phone. After some time, we heard some noise coming from the floor. We thought it was an insect which eats wood, so we searched for it but found nothing. We ignored it and listened to music, but that noise was not stopping, so we searched again and tried to find the source. It was coming from the ground floor, like ceiling scratching from down there, as the noise was also moving from one corner to the other. We got spooked and decided to ignore it because only 2 of us were awake. After some time, we heard footsteps coming from the stairs as it was metallic. Now we were panicking. The kitchen was not in the same building but was next to the house. After some time, we literally heard utensils being thrown from one corner to the other, like there was some fight going on. We were just so scared at that point that we decided to just cover ourselves with a blanket and not open our eyes or move. The next day, we went back and shared the story to our cousin's brother. He said that the neighbor's brother took his own life a long time back, and like he was relating it to that, but don't really know what it was.